So Pantone announced their 2026 color of the year a few weeks ago. And if you don't know Pantone, they're the company that standardizes color. So when a designer says Pantone 186, everyone knows exactly what red that is. They're the authority. So every year they name a color of the year. And this year, for the first time ever, they chose white. Cloud Dancer, a white. And my first reaction was, that's a choice. I mean, it seems kind of silly, right? A color company picks a color, who cares? But once I started really thinking about it, when Pantone chooses a color, designers respond to this and brands respond too. Home good manufacturers, houses, wedding planners. One company names a color and millions of tiny aesthetic decisions shift in response. Pantone tries to read the cultural moment and name what we need. So I started looking at what they've been choosing lately. So in 2024, they had this color peach fuzz, which you can probably picture. It is gentle and nurturing. And then last year, the color was mocha mousse. And just thinking about that color, I'm sure you've seen it everywhere, but it's warm and comforting. And then this year, 2026, Cloud Dancer white. And 3 years of Pantone color of the year are essentially saying the world is loud, here's something quiet. And that really got me thinking because the language hooked me. Because here's what Pantone said about Cloud Dancer, the color of the year. The part that really stopped me was they said it is clarity without coldness, structure without severity. And I thought, that's not just a color, that really feels like a teaching philosophy. Because right now I'm in this place with my students where I'm trying to hold a line. I'm trying to maintain expectations, like real ones, while also not being harsh about it. I've got students who need structure that actually want to know what's coming. Like they want the steps and they feel safer when things are predictable and clear. At first, I was resisting it, but now I'm actually embracing it and building my classroom around that. So, giving them the scaffolding, the videos, the step by step, because that honors where they are. But I also have curricular goals, right? I have standards, I have things they actually need to be able to do by the end of the year. And I've been trying to figure out, how do I honor both? Like, how do I give them the structure they need while still insisting on the growth? And the phrase that really landed for me was that, right? Clarity without coldness and structure without severity, because that's what I'm trying to do. And I started thinking, what if that's not just my approach? Like, what if that's what teaching needs right now? What if we did what Pantone does, like read the moment and name what we need, but we do that for teaching? So that's what this episode is. I want to trace how I got from Pantone chose white to something I'm calling loving insistence, which I think is the teaching move we need for 2026. And along the way, I want to talk about It's a Wonderful Life because that's what I'm teaching right now. And my team taught English 10 class. And it turns out George Bailey has something to say about all this too. It's the small choices, ripple effects, and reading the moment and responding with intention. So let's get into it. Okay, so if you have been around with me for more than a minute, you know that I show It's a Wonderful Life every December. I love it. It's what I need to get into the Christmas spirit. And every year I'm nervous because I show the colorized version, but it's a colorized version of a black and white film. It's from 1946. It's almost 80 years old. And every year I think this is the year they won't connect. And every year I'm wrong. There's something about this film that still works. And I've really been thinking about why. And I think, okay, part of it is the craft. It's just a beautifully made movie. There are so many things to just dig into from a just visual standpoint. But that's not enough to explain why teenagers who won't watch anything without jump cuts still sit for this. This year, we came to It's a Wonderful Life from Macbeth. So it's a pretty big leap, right? From Macbeth to It's a Wonderful Life, because Macbeth is about ambition, unchecked ambition, right? What happens when you decide you deserve something and you'll do anything to get it? Macbeth is a main character story, right? He's special, he's destined, and that's what destroys him. So, what I'm doing this year is before we start It's a Wonderful Life, I showed them the Adam Driver TED Talk. Okay, stick with me here. Because what Adam Driver does in this TED Talk is he talks about how acting can be a form of processing and how performing someone else's story can help you metabolize your own. And he talked about how it became therapeutic for him to work through the stories of other people in his acting. And the bridge here is what I tell them about Jimmy Stewart. So, It's a Wonderful Life is filmed after World War II. He flew bombing missions over Germany and he came back different. The breakdown on the bridge where he says, I want to live. Stewart wasn't entirely acting there. He brought his actual experience of despair to that scene and his actual relief at being alive. And students, I think, can feel that even if they can't name it. There's something really authentic there that cuts through the distance of time. And there's a bunch of little moments there where we can actually see the authenticity of the film. I think, though, the real reason that this film works is it's the opposite of main character story. George Bailey never leaves Bedford Falls, right? He never does that big thing. He gives up his trip, his education, his ambitions just over and over for small, ordinary choices. And he can't see that any of it matters. And he thinks his life was wasted. And then he gets shown every small choice rippled. The town exists because he existed. People are alive because of decisions he barely remembers making. George Bailey didn't read the moment once, he read it over and over. Every time someone needed him and he responded. And it wasn't with these grand gestures, it was just with presence and consistency and ordinary faithfulness that just compounded. This is what I want to talk about for teaching. It's I don't think the big dramatic interventions. I think it's the small choices and the stance we bring every day because something is breaking in classrooms right now. And I think we need to read the moment and respond. I keep having the same experience, and maybe you do too. I design something carefully. I scaffold, I build in supports, and I think through the steps. And I feel like students are going through the motions. I think for a while, I kept looking at the wrong things because these students are reacting in a way that feels a little bit different than they have in the past. So I really was looking at my own practice. Like, was the assignment too hard? Were my instructions unclear? Did I not give enough examples? Did I assume that they knew things that they don't? And I kept tinkering with the inputs, like my inputs, as if the problem was my design. And what actually made a difference is I started looking at my data differently. So, what I've been trying and has been actually working is using more of a flip model where students are watching videos at home and we use class time for the actual work. So, pretty traditional use of flipped classroom. And I looked at who had watched the videos because I now can do that. We couldn't really do that as well back in the time when flip learning was the rage, but now I can actually look at that, look at some statistics. My process has evolved here. So what I did first is I gave them Macbeth to watch. Like, I used the Folger Shakespeare edition, which is really great. It's what we had been watching in class. And then I had them continue watching at home. And in one class, 35% hadn't watched it. Like, they just hadn't. So, I mean, that's like over a third, right? So the scaffolding wasn't the problem. They had everything that they needed to, but they never walked through the door. They didn't meet me anywhere. They just didn't come. So I think that what I've come to is many students don't really understand what learning actually is anymore. Those students did not understand that in order to actually be able to do something, they needed to understand what happened in the play. And even after that happened, when we came to class, I asked them to do an assignment where they had to use their Act Two knowledge. And obviously, there were students that couldn't do that. they still didn't understand that this was the way that class was going to happen. So I have been just kind of baffled by this phenomenon because students will pretty clearly just say, I prioritize other classes. So they are openly deprioritizing English and expect to get a good grade anyway. And that's the thing. If they were just deprioritizing English and then took their whatever grade they earn, that would be something. But they legitimately think that what they do, even if it is hardly anything, that they should be able to get a good grade if they come to class. So they've learned that if they just wait long enough and they hand in something, anything, it'll work out. Someone will drag them across the finish line. But skills don't work like task completion, right? You can't half practice writing and be half good at it. You can't skip the reading and still analyze a text, but they don't know that. They haven't been taught by systems, by policy, that showing up partially is enough. And it's not the students who struggle. Struggle I can work with, right? It's realizing that all of these things that I've been putting in place are not the problem. The problem was they never walked with me in the first place. I want to be careful here because I'm not interested in blaming students. They learn this somewhere, and I think a lot of it traces back to post-pandemic grading policy. I have these conversations with my colleagues all the time. Math and science are different. They have tests. They have moments of truth. You know the formula or you don't. The answer is right or it isn't. And English has process, it has drafts and feedback and revision and flexible deadlines, you know? And I think that these are good pedagogical approaches. I believe in them. But I think they also became escape hatches. I think what happened here is the flexibility, like those revision opportunities, the willingness to meet students where they are, all of that used to be grace. Like grace I chose to give. Grace that meant something because it was a choice I was making. Then it became a policy, right? Accept late work always. Allow unlimited revisions and never let a grade be final. And when grace is mandated, it stops being grace. It becomes entitlement. And students learned that deadlines are suggestions. They learned that first attempts don't matter because there's always another chance. And they learned that someone will always come behind them and clean up. And in this way, they learn to be passengers in their own education. And teachers got caught in a bind. We believe in flexibility. We believe in meeting students where they are, but where they are kept getting lower. And we kept following them down. And at some point, meeting them where they are became indistinguishable from having no expectations at all. When teachers feel this, when we realize students aren't walking with us, we tend to fall into one of two traps. So trap one is the slide into no expectations. It's meet them where they are becomes accept whatever they give. So we grade the crappy paragraph, we give the C minus and we move on. We hear it's hard and then we just remove the expectation and we tell ourselves we're being compassionate, we're being realistic, but really we've stopped believing they can do it and we've given up. So this might be lowering the bar so everyone can clear it without stretching and telling yourself at least they showed up. And look, I get it. Like sometimes that happens and we get into that space where we feel like I am not able to pull my students through. The other end of the spectrum is the second trap, which is punitive rigor. In the other direction, we crack down. We give zeros for late work. We have harsh rubrics, no second chances. We insist, but without warmth. We hold the line, but with anger in our souls. It might be where you're trying to catch students, like you're trying to figure out who didn't do their work. So you have this kind of gotcha energy when students fail. And it might be having rigid policies because you're really trying to account for the students who are not doing what you want. And what is resulting from that is the more you try to get those students in line, the less room you have for humanity. Both of these are exhausting, and neither end of the spectrum works. Trap one produces students who never learn what they're capable of, And trap 2 produces students who comply or rebel but don't grow. And really, here's the thing, neither trap actually reads the moment because these are really reactionary and not intentional responses to what's actually happening. There's a third way. And in my head, I'm calling this loving insistence. Remember Pantone's language for Cloud Dancer? Clarity without coldness and structure without severity. That's what this is. Loving insistence is holding the line with warmth. It's a stance that says, I know you can do this, so I'm not going to pretend you can't. It's like, we're in this together and I need you to actually come. It assumes they can, that there's a belief underneath it, and it refuses to pretend they already are. That's the honesty. I think that when we're honest with students, that's the most loving thing that we can do for them, to say, I care enough to show you how you can be better. So I have 5 principles that I think that we can use to achieve this loving insistence. The first principle, belief before expectation. The foundation here is that everything in loving insistence rests on believing they can do it. Not believing they can do it if I lower the bar, or some of them can do it, but believing they can do this, the actual hard thing, the real standard, they can achieve it. I want to be clear. I am not suggesting toxic positivity here. I don't think it's everyone can do everything. It's more, I've designed this to be achievable. I've scaffolded it. I've supported it. And now I believe you can do it. The belief comes after the design, not instead of it. The second principle is change how, not whether. So when something is hard, like genuinely hard, you change how you approach it, right? You don't change whether you do it. If it's something you have to do, you have to do it. So in my classroom, here's why I decided to flip. Students told me reading is hard. They weren't doing it at home. They weren't actually saying reading is hard. They were communicating it through their actions. So I could have said, too bad, do it anyway. That's trap 2. I could have said, okay, we won't read at home and we'll do it together, or we won't read at all. That's trap 1. Instead, I said, okay, I believe you. Let's change how. So I'm moving reading to class where I can support it. And I'll get more into this, but I'm not just like reading for them. I'm helping them to read, and I'm giving them time and space to do it. So the videos, the instruction, the schema building that supports the reading, that's what goes home. I'm really taking them at face value. If reading is hard, we'll do the hard part together. I'll make space for you so that you can be supported in achieving the hard part. But here's the thing, there's still a deal. I changed where the support lives. I didn't remove the expectation. So the videos have to be watched. The work still has to happen. You still have to walk, right? You still have to meet. It's not, this is hard, so we won't do English anymore, or we'll do less English. It's, this is hard, so we'll figure out how to make it possible. The third principle is grace is earned access. So grace used to mean you did the work, you engaged with the process, and now I'll meet you in your struggle. It's what you offer after someone shows up. But grace got inverted in this bizarro world that we've entered. So now students expect grace as the default before they've done anything. So they ask if they can have an extension before they have even attempted to complete it during the time that I've given. I don't know if this happens to you, but all the time, students, while they're working, they still have an hour left of class, and they'll say, what if I don't get this done? Well, why don't you try first? Or will we be able to revise this on work that they haven't attempted for the first time? But loving insistence reclaims grace. So grace is, I changed how, not I changed whether. Grace is, you showed up and it didn't work, so let's try again. Not, you didn't show up and I'll pretend you did. I've started thinking of it as earned access. You did the foundational work, now you get my feedback. You engage with the process, now you get revision opportunities. You walked with me, now I will go the extra mile with you. But you don't get the second thing without the first thing. The fourth principle is white space is the stance. So going back to Pantone, remember, white isn't nothing. In design, white space is what lets everything else breathe. And Pantone chose white because the world is loud. That's the language that they use. So white space in teaching, in Loving Insistence, white space is like silence after you state the expectation. You've said what you need, now you wait. And it's the room you leave for them to step into. You're not doing their part for them. I don't intend this to be cold because it's not withholding anything. It's really, okay, like think about the difference between a teacher who says, you need to do this, and then hovers and nags and reminds and checks and follows up constantly. And look, I get it. That is what we've been asked to do. But it's the difference between that teacher and a teacher who says, you need to do this. I'll be here when you're ready. And then actually waits. And you can tell them, you can keep telling them, I'll be here when you're ready. But you don't need to keep checking and following up constantly with the students who are not making an attempt to meet you there. I think the second teacher is actually more present. It totally recognize that this is not for all students, but I do think that this is for most students, the stance that we need to take, because this is where we used to be. We could tell students, here are my expectations. Here is everything that I will provide to you. But I do have some expectations that when you get to me, that you have done something to meet me here, which is walk those steps. Let me show you what those steps are. There are some students that for whatever reason, you might need to do that other thing, right? You might need to do a little bit extra. You have a little bit more that you'll need to do, but it won't be everybody. And I feel like what's happened now is that it's almost like inverted what it should be. There's a small set of students who need that extra support, but that percentage has gotten too large. So I think it's hold the line here. Principle 5 is walking together and not dragging them. So really saying, we're going somewhere together and I need you to actually come. I think this is really the heart of Loving Insistence. I'm not behind you pushing. I'm not in front of you dragging. I'm really beside you, but only if you're moving. I think there's a difference between a student who's struggling and a student who's not walking, right? The struggling students are trying, they're moving, and they might be slow, they might need support, but they're in motion. And those students, I will climb mountains for them. But students who aren't walking, I can't carry them. And I won't pretend that I can, because I can't. I cannot put all of you on my back. So George Bailey didn't actually drag anyone, right? People chose to walk with him because he was worth walking with, because he kept showing up. And when they walked, he walked with them. And that's the relationship. That's the relationship, right? That's the deal. So I'm not suggesting abandoning students who aren't walking. So 5 principles. That's the theory I've put together. But what does this actually look like in a classroom? I've already talked about this, but moving reading into class and instruction to home has really helped me. The loving part is I heard you, I adjusted. The hard thing happens where I could support you. And it's clear that I've put a lot of work into this for you because you told me that this is what you need through your actions. The insistence part is the videos still have to be watched. The deal is still the deal. I've been doing things like pass fail on foundation work. Some things aren't how well did you do this? They're did you do this? And I would say this is not my normal stance, but I think that students also need that right now to say, I just threw you a bone here. So some of you got it. Some of you didn't. And I'm not saying that this is going to be what I do all the time, but to just be like, hey, walk with me and I am trying to do the best for you. So in this case, no partial credit for not trying. That's not punitive. That's just clarity, like showing where we are. And another thing that I've been doing is writing tasks that require the homework to have happened. You can't fake it if the prompt asks you to apply what you learned from the video. It's not a gotcha. It's, can you show me that you did it? In some cases, a student will give me something and I'll say, I can't give you feedback yet. There's not enough here. And I will give you feedback when you're ready for that. But also, now I've already spent the time that I've allotted for this. So if you would like some feedback after you do the work, let's set up a time outside of my regular process that we can do that. So more than any technique, I think it's the energy. I'm not angry. I'm just steady and clear and warm and holding the line. This is what we're doing. I'll be here when you're ready. George Bailey never knew his small choices mattered. He couldn't see the ripples. He just kept showing up and reading the moment and responding with what's needed. And it turns out that was enough, right? More than enough. It's the small choices, naming a stance, deciding how you're going to show up. How are you going to be when a student doesn't do the thing? Are you going to give up on them? Are you going to punish them? Are you going to hold the line with warmth and weight? So the steps, the clarity, the predictability, but still insisting they actually walk through the door so that we can get to where they need to be by the end of the year. So this is my Pantone moment. It's my read on what teaching needs right now. I think it needs this loving insistence, the structure without severity, and the clarity without coldness, and telling our students we're going somewhere together, and I need you to actually come.